Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to another Watchman Newscast live stream. We've got some breaking news. It seems that the 10 hostages who were set to be released by Hamas out of Gaza captivity today, sent back into Israel, into freedom, that release has reportedly been delayed. Now, the Israeli War Cabinet is meeting as I speak. I'm coming to you around 4 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States, but the big question is, will this truce be extended? Because it's already been extended a few days, obviously, and it's day 6. This would be the 6th round of hostages released, and yet there is a delay. This is not surprising in that, as we've documented here for you on the newscast over the past few days, since this truce kicked in, Hamas has been playing games here, folks. It's been psychological warfare. Now, they agreed not to separate families, not to separate mothers from their children, but they did exactly that. There are fathers of children who were freed, husbands who are still in captivity, their loved ones were released, and the list goes on. We're now hearing stories emerge, especially from the children who were released, of Hamas torture and torment, psychological and physical, that they underwent in captivity in Gaza. So this is par for the course. This may, look, the release may indeed happen. It's around midnight now, past midnight in Israel right now, as I come to you on Wednesday, November 29th. They may be released before we end this stream even. This is the kind of games, these are the kind of games that Hamas is playing with the psyches of the Israeli public, with the families, of course, with the hostages themselves. And by the way, you may have seen the footage over the past few days. Now Hamas makes a very, very big fuss, I guess you would say, when they are releasing these hostages. They are handing them over to the International Red Cross to be taken through Egypt usually and then back into Israel. But there are hundreds of Gazans out there screaming at the hostages, women, little children, as they're doing this walk of shame, this procession that Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists, who've been present, by the way, are putting them through. Yeah, they're releasing them from captivity, but they're being screamed at and cursed at. And we hear, of course, the shouts of Allahu Akbar cascading all around them as they're being released from Hamas captivity. So that's the state of play right now with the hostages. And again, by the time we're done here, these 10 may indeed be released. Remember, this truce, which was originally supposed to last for 4 days, has now been extended. We're on day 6 now of this temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And remember, beyond those 4 days, for every additional day, Hamas is supposed to release 10 additional hostages. Again, they're dragging their feet on that certainly today. Overall, we had 2 Russian nationals, by the way, released today, November 29th. Hamas said, and they literally said this, as basically an ode to Vladimir Putin, as a nod, a show of thanks to Vladimir Putin. And number one, we'll talk more about Russia and the prophetic implications of its role in the Middle East a bit later in this live stream. But number 2, remember, the show of thanks to Hamas by Russia, again, no surprise. Remember, I think about 10 days after the October 7th massacre, Russia hosted a Hamas delegation in Moscow. The ultimate slap in the face to Israel. So again, Hamas's shout out to Russia and allowing these Russian hostages to go free is not surprising, sadly. And you can look for Russia's relationship with Israel's enemies, the Iranian regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the rest. Turkey, which is essentially, folks, look, essentially an enemy under the leadership of Erdogan. Turkey, at least in the diplomatic realm, is now certainly an enemy of Israel. Look for Russia to continue to cozy up with these enemies of the world's one and only Jewish state. So some 161 hostages still in captivity. It may be 159 now, actually, when you count those 2 Russians who were released, but I believe it's about 146 Israelis. It might be minus 10 if these hostages today are released, plus some 13 to 15 foreign nationals being held by Hamas. Still, we've seen a lot of people from Thailand, nationals released over the past few days. We've seen some French, German. We've seen several dual citizens, but still at least 160 or so still in captivity, some 54, 55 days into this war. It's been nearly 8 weeks now, since the most heinous and bloodthirsty and crazed massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust took place. And that was indeed October 7th, some 1,200 Israelis slaughtered, mostly civilians. And of course, as we've been discussing, women, children, the elderly, dragged back into the bowels of hell, these tunnels beneath Gaza by Hamas terrorists. So that is the state of play. I wanted to start with that on today's live stream. And look, we've got a lot to unpack during our time together. We've got thousands with us now. We'll have thousands more before we are done. Thank you, everyone from around the world, for joining us nearly 8 weeks in. And we're still going at it, and we're going to go at it every day until the dust settles. And it might be a while, because if and when this dust so-called settles in Gaza, Lebanon is the next front, and we're watching Yemen very closely as well. We will talk about both today. But what do you think of this? Should Israel on day 6 now, look, 4-day truce was agreed to, and Hamas again said, well, the longer you extend the truce, Israel, for every additional day, we will release 10 additional hostages. What do you think of this? Is it time for Israel to say enough is enough? Almost, I think, all of the hostages, at least the Israeli hostages who were released, not those from Thailand, there were some men there, but almost, I think practically all of the Israeli hostages released were women and children. I don't think any men have been released. Correct me if I'm wrong. Out of these dozens of Israeli hostages who have been released. So it's men, it's soldiers, it's former soldiers still in Gaza right now. For the most part, it seems, although one note for you, and I'm going to get their names correct here. I'm just going to read this right off my phone. One family who I'm sure you have seen, the Bibas family, they become known as the Redheads, affectionately by people who've been watching this. A mother and her 4-year-old and her 10-month-old baby have still not been released. A 10-month-old baby and a 4-year-old, along with their mom. Now, Hamas is telling Israel reportedly that they're dead, that this family was killed in, according to Hamas, an Israeli airstrike. We shall see. Israel is trying to verify that information. But other than this family, I imagine you still got some women, elderly, and children there, and you've got mainly, it seems at this point, men, Israeli men there. So at this point, and if this family has been killed, that could be a game changer, because they've been one of the public faces of the hostages. This family, again, affectionately known as the Redheads, a little red-haired baby, little red-haired 4-year-old and their mom. And the images of them being carted off by Hamas on October 7th were all over the place. Does Israel extend this truce at this point? It's day 6. I think everyone watching right now knows what Hamas is getting at here. Hamas is trying to stretch this thing out and stretch it out some more and stretch it out some more, say a week, say 2 weeks, and wring every concession they can out of Israel. Remember, as these hostages are being released, Israel is also freeing Palestinian prisoners and Hamas sympathizers and terrorists from Israeli prisons. Do you think at this point it's enough is enough? Resume the offensive against Hamas in Gaza. What do you think? I got to tell you, I've been kind of taking this poll every day here in the live stream. We have a very active and educated audience, a great chat going on right now. And I have to tell you, most people have said from the outset, don't do it. Don't do the ceasefire. Keep the pressure on. We want the hostages to return home, but the best way to pressure Hamas to release the hostages is to continue to crush Hamas until they're absolutely begging for mercy and they release all the hostages. That was one school of thought. Another school of thought was, okay, do it temporarily, then start back up. And others are saying now, no more, enough is enough. No extension. I see a lot of comments here. I mean, at this point, the Israeli government, and pray for them, folks, pray for wisdom for Israel's leaders right now. They are in the most difficult spot that I can imagine, in that, of course, they want all of the hostages released. Everyone does. Look, I've had families of the hostages on the Watchman and on Israel Under Fire, the programs I host every week. So We're advocating, praying every day for them to be rescued, to be released out of captivity. But if this thing stretches out and continues to stretch, I'm not sure where it's going. What I mean by that is the so-called international community, yes, led by the United States, may start to apply serious pressure to Israel. And I mentioned this on the live stream on Monday, serious pressure for a permanent ceasefire, in that they're saying, wow, it's been so nice this past week. It's been quiet. Even Hezbollah has held its fire to the north out of southern Lebanon. You know what? Let's just make this permanent. Folks, we already have people saying this right now. Joe Biden is saying we'd like an extended ceasefire. Now, what that would mean for Israel and the United States by extension, we'll talk about in a minute. It ain't good. But there are many in the world right now, the so-called international community, clamoring for a permanent ceasefire. Come on, Israel. You've killed, by last count, reportedly some 5,000, give or take, Hamas terrorists. You've conquered northern Gaza, essentially controlled Gaza City. You've rooted out Hamas infrastructure, terror tunnels, etc. There's much more to be done. Hamas's leaders, Hamas terrorists, have fled south to Rafah, to Khan Yunis, the southern part of Gaza. Folks, this thing's anything but finished. It may only be just beginning, to be honest with you, if Israel resumes, if and when. And if they don't, big trouble for this current government in Israel. But you get the sense right now that the world is going to start ramping up the pressure on Israel even more. Hey, just agree to a permanent ceasefire. And here's the big hook they're going to use, ladies and gentlemen, potentially. And we've heard rumblings and reports out of the region alluding to this. An all-for-all deal. What does that mean? It means every hostage would be released by Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the other terror groups in Gaza that are holding them right now. Every hostage would be released in exchange for a mass release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons, including perhaps some of the perpetrators of October 7th, and for a permanent ceasefire. Now, if Israel does that, I can tell you this much. The current government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, is over. If they would dare agree to that under U.S. pressure, no doubt, and international pressure, they're done. If they do not finish the job here and decisively crush Hamas once and for all so that it never threatens the state of Israel ever again, then they're done. Yes, people absolutely want to see the hostages free. Everyone knows that. Absolutely, 110. Who doesn't? Who hasn't been moved by these images the past few days of families reunited and little kids and women and the elderly escaping Hamas barbarity and captivity? Of course. But if the price is essentially a draw in this war, a ceasefire, an exchange, and look, you can't compare the hostages who were civilians forcibly taken from their beds after their loved ones were slaughtered before their eyes in the most barbaric fashions. You can't compare them to prisoners in prisons who committed crimes and were convicted. But that's what the world's trying to do. They're trying to draw a moral equivalency and say, look, it's a hostage exchange, some have said. I'm sorry. The Hamas supporters and Hamas members in Israeli jails right now are not hostages. They are convicted terrorists and criminals. You can't compare them to a 10-month-old Israeli baby or a 4-year-old toddler being held by Hamas in Gaza. But we live in times, folks, that the prophet Isaiah talked about. He put it very aptly. He said, woe to those who put good for evil and evil for good. They call good evil, they call evil good. Bible times. Congratulations, you're in them. Prophetic times right now. You see the moral rot unfolding before your eyes, where people are drawing a moral equivalency between Hamas terrorists and Israel, between the Israel Defense Forces and Hamas jihadists, between Israeli hostages who were dragged from their beds in a bloodbath, and terrorists who've been convicted for plotting to murder civilians and who are in prison, and rightfully so. That's where we're at. Welcome to 2023, soon to be 2024. If Israel would agree to this all for all kind of deal, it would be the end of this current government. It may not already look, it may not last much longer to begin with. Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. The buck stops at my desk. Responsibility lies with me. Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been on the program, I've interviewed him. I believe he's one of the great prime ministers in Israel's history. He's the longest serving. He's done great things, but he was presiding over October 7th. There's no way around it. He was the prime minister on October 7th. That's indisputable. And he has said, look, there will be a reckoning and we'll have hearings and all the rest when the dust settles here. But again, I don't know when the dust is going to settle. It may not be anytime soon, because if and when Israel finishes the job in Gaza, which it must, then look to the north, because Israel is vowing to reset the security situation there in southern Lebanon. If Israel agrees to a premature ceasefire, can any Israeli, this is a nation the size of the state of New Jersey, remember, a helpful reminder for you, can any Israeli sleep safely in their beds ever again, at least in the near future, if Hamas lives to fight another day with still thousands of well-armed terrorists in Gaza? If Hezbollah still fully intact, full strength, the Iranian regime, the Houthis, all of them. If a ceasefire is called, hostility ends, all the Israeli reserves go home, what Israeli will sleep soundly in their bed every night? Especially those who are anywhere near the vicinity of the Gaza border or the Lebanon border. They won't. It's unsustainable, folks. It's a non-starter. There have been over 30 communities in northern Israel evacuated along the Lebanon border. Who will go back if the dust settles and Hezbollah is still fully intact and at full strength, perched on the Israel-Lebanon border? Today, we had images of Hezbollah terrorists, although they've observed the ceasefire. They've held their fire the past few days. Hezbollah terrorists, again, walking around the border area, taking pictures of the IDF. And folks, I can tell you, I've been on that border many times. And one of the more recent times, I was with the IDF. I went into a Hezbollah terror tunnel, and there were Hezbollah terrorists taking pictures of us right on the border, a few hundred yards away from us, in plain view, in civilian clothes. This is what they do. They're emboldened. You think they're bold now? Imagine if Israel doesn't finish the job. It would be the ultimate sign of weakness to Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah. They would be licking their chops, and they would capitalize. And by extension, it would make the United States look weak as well, because the world would know that Israel caved to international pressure and agreed to a premature ceasefire because of United States pressure. So it's a double whammy. Israel will be weakened and the United States will be weakened in the eyes of the world's worst actors, the most dangerous regimes. They'll smell blood in the water, and they will strike. Look, Hamas smelled weakness in Washington, D.C., smelled distraction in Jerusalem with all the protest, anti-government protest over the past year. And they said, this is an opportune time to strike. There's disarray in the United States. There's disarray in Israel. Certainly factored into their thinking. I'm not saying those are the main reasons, but certainly it factored into their thinking in terms of timing, as did the looming possibility at least 8 weeks ago of an Israeli-Saudi peace deal. There are many factors, but these were certainly foremost on their list of reasons why they should act now, meaning October 7th. But folks, look, I can't begin to overstate the disastrous consequences if Israel agrees to a premature ceasefire here, tries this all-for-all deal. Now, I laid that out, and because I had to, because it's being discussed, and because, folks, I'm telling you right now, the international pressure is going to increase. The longer this truce lasts, the more you're going to hear outside voices saying, let's make it permanent. Now, I say all that, and yet Israeli leaders continue to maintain, hey, we are not letting up. We are going to crush Hamas. As soon as the truce is over, we're going to finish the job. Hamas has had 6 days to dig in, to recuperate, to booby trap, plant explosives, etc., to lick their wounds and try and regroup. This extends to 10 days, 12 days. And look, again, no one is against everyone wants every last hostage home. That goes without saying. But Hamas has a plan to drag this thing out to the point where it's very difficult for Israel to resume its offensive in Gaza, chiefly because of international pressure. But also, Hamas has been able to sufficiently regroup and put up more resistance. Because look, folks, 6 days ago, Israel was mowing through Hamas. Massive momentum, some serious accomplishments in this war thus far. Many Hamas commanders killed, tunnels destroyed, these hospitals, which sadly were used as terror command and control centers, bases by Hamas, raided and neutralized. Their terror apparatus inside these hospitals. The list goes on. Hamas was on the run. Israel was well on its way to the very difficult task, stated goal of destroying Hamas and pacifying Gaza. I'm not saying, look, if the war resumes tomorrow, I'm not saying that Israel's not going to pick up right where it left off. God willing, it will. But I don't know what Hamas has done behind the scenes over the past 6 days. And if this extends to 10 days, 11 days, 2 weeks, that seems like quite a pause for the IDF. I am not a military strategist. I interview them often. Military strategists, analysts, generals, both current and former national security advisors from Israel and elsewhere around the world. So I'm around these folks a lot. And I can tell you, 2 weeks, if this extended to 2 weeks, and we don't know. Again, fighting may resume tomorrow. Israel may say, okay, enough is enough. We got about 80 hostages out. Let's go back in. Let's finish the job. They may. But if they don't, and this thing continues, the truce continues to extend, I don't know. What do you think, everyone? Do you get a little antsy? I mean, do we have any military folks out there as well? At that point, is momentum lost? Whether it's lost or not, Israel's got to go back in and regain it if it was lost. But a lot of questions here. I've been saying this over the past few weeks. This is to say this is a difficult issue is an understatement. Everyone wants hostages home. Everyone wants to see Israelis released from the hell of Hamas captivity, families reunited. We all want to see that. We're praying for it around the clock. But on the other hand, if we want Israel to finish the job of crushing Hamas, which is equally necessary, so that it can never threaten Israel and take more hostages and slaughter more Israelis in the future. So I would say right now, pray for the wisdom of Solomon, for Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's leadership, and a spine of steel to resist international pressure, especially that applied by the United States. And by the way, the U.S. and others are obviously wringing their hands and gnashing their teeth about the state of things for Palestinian civilians in Gaza. I'd like to see more polls about the number in the West Bank, we call it Judea and Samaria here in the newscast, and in Gaza, of just average Palestinians who support Hamas and supported what happened on October 7th, because there were some stunning polls just this week out of the West Bank showing a majority that were polled supported October 7th. And Gazan civilians voted for Hamas in large numbers in 2006. And you can't say that at that point, well, they didn't know what they were getting into. They were surprised. They voted for Hamas. They didn't know it was going to turn out like this, that this would be a demonic death cult, Nazis running the Gaza Strip and oppressing their own people at every turn. I don't buy that. You can't say they didn't know when they voted for Hamas in 2006, because for nearly 20 years before that, since Hamas's founding in 1987-88, Hamas had made very clear, number one, what they intended to do in their founding charter, slaughter every Jew and wipe Israel off the map. But number two, they took tangible steps to make that demonic goal a reality. Meaning, by 2006, the second intifada was 6 years old. Began in 2000 and ended roughly in 2006. By the way, ironically enough, or not, around the time Israel completed its security fence. But nonetheless, it became a little tougher for suicide bombers to infiltrate, but nonetheless, there was a long litany of Hamas suicide bombings and barbarities and crimes against humanity committed before 2006, when Gazans voted them into power in large numbers. They knew who Hamas was. They knew who they were voting for, and they did it anyway. And the jubilant images of Palestinians celebrating the hostages when they were dragged into Gaza on October 7th, and the jubilant images of this walk of shame Hamas is trying to put the hostages through as they're released. Look, obviously not every Palestinian supports Hamas, far from it. But does a majority? Do over 50% of Palestinians in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, support Hamas? Folks, I think it's worth asking. I think that's a perfectly valid question. And I'd like to see some more estimates on that, or polling, or some more concrete numbers there, so that Israel and the world know what they are dealing with. They know what they're dealing with already, a demonic death cult in the form of Hamas, Islamic Jihad. But I'm talking about after the war and reconstruction, I guess you would say, in Gaza or whatever happens there. And in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, what happens there? The de-radicalization that needs to be done in that culture and in that society. Hey, we've documented this on the Watchman, the textbooks, the TV shows, the cartoons for little kids, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on and on. From the womb to the tomb, as they say, young Palestinians are indoctrinated in Jew hatred and anti-Western sentiment and genocidal sentiment, pro-Hitler, in official textbooks and TV shows and cartoons. So there needs to be an extensive de-radicalization program in the Palestinian territories. No doubt. So we'll see how eager the Biden administration, which wants to throw money at the Palestinians every turn, we'll see how eager they are to throw money at that when it comes to the Palestinians. A massive, sweeping de-radicalization, deprogramming campaign in an attempt to transform that society after Hamas is destroyed, and only then, by the way, and Islamic Jihad, the other Iranian proxy there. I want to get to Iran in a minute, Iran, Russia, and some prophetic implications. But real quick, two things. Number one, a programming note. Tonight, Wednesday, November 29th, on TBN and the TBN app, a TBN special, 2 hours, 8 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern time. I stand with Israel. Simple as that. Simple and very effective name. I stand with Israel. I'm featured on this program along with Franklin Graham, Jensen Franklin, Sammy Rodriguez, Rabbi Jason Sobel, Sean Boltz. The list goes on and on. Some Christian leaders and voices that you will know and respect join us, and it's a great 2-hour program tonight, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time on TBN and the TBN app. Please tune in, and you'll get your marching orders, so to speak, on what to pray for, how to pray right now. Number two, before we get into Iran and Russia real quick and some major, major developments in that prophetic, and not in a good way, prophetic anti-Israel alliance. A lot of people have been asking about how they can support Israel. We've told you about Meir Panim, my good friends there in Israel. Now I want to tell you about Artza. Right now, the Israeli economy is in trouble. When you're at war, when you're a nation the size of the state of New Jersey, 10 million people, some 7 million Jews, and you're at war, and dozens upon dozens of your communities have been evacuated, people are living in shelters, and one region of your nation, southern Israel, large areas of it have been destroyed and ravaged by Hamas terrorists, then your economy, there's some sleepless nights for the people running Israel's economy right now, put it that way. It's a tough, tough position to be in. You have to replenish your military, your armaments. Israeli businesses, tourism has come to a screeching halt, which is one of the main driving engines of Israel's economy. What I'm saying to you right now is the people of Israel could use a few good friends. And you know who your friends are when the going gets tough. Artza is our friend here at the Watchman. They're a great Israeli small business owned and operated by Israelis, including a dear friend of mine who is a member of Israel's reserves right now, fighting terrorists. It's a great Israeli small business that gives you, number one, it enables you to help Israel's economy, fulfill that biblical mandate, Genesis 12:3, to bless the people of Israel. But if you can't get to the Holy Land right now, and not many can, it's a state of war, many flights have been canceled. This is the next best thing to getting to Israel. And Artza Box, incredible products, and you see them on your screen, made by Israeli artisans and small businesses, handcrafted in the Holy Land, places like Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Galilee, the Golan, the Negev, and beyond, by amazing Israeli companies who all have an incredible story that's included in your Artza Box. Folks, this isn't like a shoe box. This is high quality, impressive workmanship straight from the Holy Land, the perfect Christmas gift, the perfect Hanukkah gift for your family, the Israel lover in your home, someone who loves the Bible, loves the Holy Land. Maybe they've never been to Israel. Maybe they've been there but haven't had a chance to get back. This will give you a taste, quite literally in some cases, with some of the great products in the box, a taste, the feel of Israel. It will put a smile on your face, and it will help you help Israel, help the Israeli economy, and help Israeli small businesses. The Watchman discount is Watchman, M-A-N, Watchman 18 to get 18% off your Artza Box. Go to Artza. You see the information there on your screen, A-R-T-Z-A, artzabox.com. Artzabox.com, discount code Watchman18. Get that 18% discount. Do something great for Israel, for a great Israeli small business that we can personally vouch for here in the Watchman, and bless the people of Israel at a time when they need it most. Don't miss that. Check that out. It's a great offer and a great organization. Okay, last thoughts here before we go. Iran and Russia. Surprise, surprise. We've been talking about this growing alliance between these two nations for some time now, and now we have an update. We've told you that the Iran-Russia relationship is a quid pro quo. What do I mean by that? Well, Iran has been supplying Russia with hundreds, probably at this point, thousands of attack drones, so-called suicide drones or kamikaze drones that Russia has used to deadly effect in Ukraine. There have been reports that Iran may also supply Russia with some short and medium-range missiles. You may say, why is Russia looking to Iran for weaponry? Well, it's been almost 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine, and they need to replenish their weapons stockpiles. They're turning to North Korea. They're turning to China. And yes, they're turning to the Iranian regime. And the Iranian regime is all too happy to provide Russia with those very weapons. But it's not for free, and it's not out of the goodness of the mullahs in Tehran's hearts. They have black hearts, the likes of Ayatollah Khamenei, Raisi, and all the rest of that rabble. We know that. But this is what Russia, this is part of the quid pro quo. And here's how Russia is beginning, and I believe the payback will go deeper prophetically, but how they're beginning to pay Iran back. Listen to this. I'm just reading it right off my phone. Iran has finalized an agreement with Russia to buy Su-35 fighter jets, Mi-28 attack helicopters, and Yak, Y-A-K 130 jet trainers. Iran confirmed yesterday. And these transfers and these sales are underway. So Iran buying advanced fighter jets from Russia. Why is this a big deal? A few reasons. Number one, Iran's current air force is severely, severely outdated. They're flying planes from the 60s and 70s, 1960s, 1970s in some cases. So they'll get advanced Iranian helicopters, Russian fighter jets, helicopters, etc. That's number one. Number two, it just solidifies that relationship between Iran and Russia. They're collaborating across all spheres: trade, economy, military, technology. This is a formal alliance, ladies and gentlemen, that can't be understated. And that brings us to number three. As that relationship deepens, listen, Israel strikes Iran. Israel destroys Hezbollah, Hamas, strikes Iran's nuclear facilities. These are all things that may very well happen in the months to come, in the years to come. Look, Iran is Russia's partner, and Israel is attacking Russia's partner and its friends. Will Russia just sit idly by and do nothing? You might say, well, look at Syria. Indeed, over the past nearly a decade now, Israel has been carrying out airstrikes against Iranian assets in Syria at Israel's northern doorstep, under the noses of thousands of Russian troops. Well, that's been since 2015, since Russia entered Syria. So it's happening under the noses of Vladimir Putin's soldiers. And Russia has stood by. It has not lifted a finger against Israel that we know of in Syria to stop Israeli activity in Syria. Why is that so crucial? Two things. Number one, Iran wants to establish a permanent military beachhead in Syria at Israel's doorstep. That's a non-starter for Israel, obviously. Israel cannot allow that. And number two, look, they want to perch themselves on the Golan Heights. I mean, this is obvious. And they want to duplicate what they've done in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah. It's obvious. And number two, Iran uses Syria as a transit point for advanced weapons, particularly precision-guided munitions that it can send to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. These are all non-starters and absolute red lines for Israel, needless to say. So Israel must have freedom of movement in Syria. What if Russia says, Israel no more? Look, Russia has egg on its face to an extent. Israel is striking the Assad regime, the Iranian regime, and Hezbollah. These are all Russia's allies under their noses in Syria. How long? And they've had this deconfliction mechanism, so-called, Israel and Russia. How long does Russia sit back and watch this? Is part of the quid pro quo that we are discussing Russia finally saying, you know what, with Iranian prodding, with Iran saying, you're supposed to be our ally, and you're allowing the Zionist entity to just smash us in Syria? When are you going to step up and have our back? We've had your back in Ukraine, Iran can say. When are you going to return the favor? Iran says, you need us, Vladimir. A few years ago, you didn't. We were the junior partner. Now we're on more equal footing because the world is mostly considers Putin and Russia a pariah now, most of the world. But Iran, North Korea, Cuba, China, etc., do not. And they're saying, you need us. And Iran can say, look, you need us in the diplomatic realm, at the UN, etc. We'll have your back. But you need to do this for us, Vladimir. And Putin, look, the Israel-Russia relationship has been unraveling since the Ukraine invasion, clearly. And Putin is positioning Russia more and more towards the east, strengthening ties with Turkey, by the way, which is also shifting to the east, away from NATO, clearly. So how long? Would anyone watching be shocked if Russia said, you know, no-fly zone, Israel, no more. Knock it off in Syria? Well, that's a non-starter for Israel, because the alternative is those 2 points I named a minute ago, that Iran drives to the border of the Golan and that Iran plants precision-guided missiles in southern Lebanon and in Syria, for that matter. Israel can't accept it. It's a collision course in Syria. But what if Russia gets involved in a major way and starts throwing its weight around and starts trying to control the skies above Syria and deny Israeli freedom of movement there, Israeli military and Air Force freedom of movement? Folks, then you have a crisis, a budding crisis. It's moving in that direction. How do I know that? Strictly in the natural, do the math. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to see, if you're Israel, Russia is in bed with our greatest enemies: Iran, Assad, Hezbollah, and to an extent, Hamas. To an extent, in the diplomatic realm at least, rolling out the red carpet for Hamas terrorists 10 days after October 7th in Moscow. So if you're Israel, you have to look at this very wisely and say, do the math. If Russia is increasingly aligned with our greatest enemy, the Iranian regime, and its proxies and its allies, that probably doesn't bode well for Israeli-Russian relations. Strictly in the natural, again, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to see that. Number two, prophetically, I believe the Bible demands, and Bible prophecy demands, Russia and Iran coming closer together, and Turkey for that matter. I look at the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. We've discussed it many times here, but now you really see the ground being kind of made fertile for it and the prophetic chess pieces moving on the board, where Russia and Iran will lead this latter days confederation of nations against Israel. Now, they will meet their demise on the mountains of Israel. If you don't doubt that, go and read Ezekiel 38 and 39. But nonetheless, Israel is going to have to deal with this. It's coming. And the sooner Israel realizes this, and hopefully, if there was any doubt before this war, the leaders in Israel, their eyes are wide open to what Vladimir Putin's regime is all about. It's not a friend. And I think Israel is going to have to, when the dust settles, whether it's Qatar, Russia, Turkey, Israel's got some very hard questions to ask about how they approach what are really hostile powers. So keep all this in prayer. It almost sounds trite. Well, pray about it. But no, really, pray about it, because prayer works. Join us tonight for the Stand with Israel special, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on TBN and the TBN app. There'll be a lot of prayer there and some prayer points and things you can specifically intercede on. We've got many prayer warriors watching us right now. But good stuff. And tomorrow we will be rolling. Another little programming note, mark your calendars, at 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, a little earlier tomorrow. Live broadcast with some very special guests. Topic on tomorrow's live stream: who is funding Hamas and Hezbollah? I think you'll be very interested to hear what this former Mossad agent has to say, who will be joining us tomorrow. That is live right here on the channel tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Don't miss it. Until then, thanks for joining us today. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.